Hey you, if you're enjoying the podcast, do us a favor and go into your podcast app right now and tap the subscribe button so you never miss another episode. And if you're into reading, go to weirdtruecrime.com to get written versions of the cases we cover on the show, along with extra visual content. All the fun happens on social media, so come talk to us on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at our handle @WeirdTrueCrime. And I know it's a giant pain, but it would mean the world to us if you would take 2 minutes to leave us a rating and review. We'll be sure to give you a shout out on future episodes.
Darkcast Network, indie pods with a dark side.
Hey, little skeletons. I'm Gina.
And I'm Amber.
And this is Weird True Crime.
Oh my God, I feel like it's been an entire year since we were able to sit down here and chat. I know in our last episode, we mentioned life being crazy and hectic and illnesses and all that. And here's a fun fact. Kids do not care if you want to have 10 minutes alone.
No.
To do whatever you want.
No, not even
they
a
don't
little
care.
bit. No.
Texas was just recently hit with what they're referring to now as an ice hurricane. Did you hear that? That's what they're calling it. It was an ice hurricane.
I actually had no idea that's what they were calling it. And that's a little ridiculous and dramatic.
I don't know. Do you remember driving around afterwards and seeing the destruction, trees, limbs, freaking everywhere? It did kind of resemble a war zone. So
it was definitely war zone-ish. So I guess I could see that. But ice hurricane winter
still sounds a little dramatic.
A little bit. There was no hurricane. Just lots of ice and trees falling everywhere.
Well, at least now life is slowly calming down and returning to normal-ish. I'll say that.
Yes.
Air quotes, normal.
Yes.
And even though we've been MIA, we have not stopped thinking about getting back to our own little corner of chaos with you all. And today we're finally making it happen.
Finally. I think we have talked about it literally every day. Like, I can't wait to record again. When are we finally going to get to sit down? Like, can people leave us alone for 2 hours so we can...
I think I've threatened the lives of my husband and children many times just so I could get to do this again, finally.
100%.
There have been several other podcasts and true crime YouTubers that have covered this case, but with the family's fight to get justice for their daughter, it's currently back in the spotlight. The more exposure, the better.
100%. This is such an interesting case, and like you said, if it's been covered by so many people, but I don't think it really matters how many times you talk or hear about this case. Like, it never stops being interesting or a case that just leaves you questioning everything every single time you hear about it.
Well, even though there's a lot of people that have covered it, not everybody listens to all of them. So if we can help continue to spread it, we'll do our little part in it. We're especially excited to be talking about this particular case as it will leave you saying WTF many, many times. Now, without further ado, let's dive in.
Ellen Ray Greenberg, affectionately referred to as Ellie by her friends and family, was born on June 23, 1983, to parents Joshua and Sandra Greenberg. Her parents described her as very girly. She loved all things girly, but she was also athletic. When they moved from New Jersey to Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, they had softball tryouts and she was the second pick. She was described as having a very kind and nurturing soul with incredible energy, a beautiful smile, and a deep laugh. And honestly, she was beautiful. She had the kindest smile. All the pictures of her, she just looked like the friendliest, happiest person. And I feel like she would have been somebody that you would have wanted to be friends with and know immediately. So that makes this even harder. She loved kids, so it was no surprise when she ended up becoming a teacher. According to her father, she had tried going for a speech pathology master's, but she quickly discovered that it wasn't for her. She picked up her stuff and moved to Philadelphia and got her teaching certificate and became a first-grade teacher at Juniata Park Academy, where she was well-loved by her students and colleagues.
Eventually, Ellen met Sam Goldberg, who was a TV producer for NBC. They were together for 3 years and then got engaged. There's a really sweet picture of her showing off her engagement ring at the top of the mountain they had hiked that day. She's glowing and she looks like the epitome of a happy young woman in love. Ellen was super excited about the wedding they had planned for August of 2011 at the Hotel Hershey in Pennsylvania. I saw some pictures of that place and it is beautiful. Ellen's parents thought Sam was a nice guy, and as long as Ellen was happy, they were happy.
And although Ellen was seemingly happy, she began to struggle with severe anxiety and told her parents that she wanted to move back home. Teaching is not an easy profession, and planning a wedding can be daunting and overwhelming, so it's not surprising that she may have been feeling anxious. This is something that both of us, me and Amber, have dealt with and we can empathize with. And, it's not fun. And you do get to a point where you kind of want to just give up and go home to mom and dad, but you have to power through. And that's exactly what her parents told her to do. They did note that the change in her personality was confusing and concerning and very out of character, but they did convince her to see a psychiatrist, which she had seen 3 times, and she was scheduled for a 4th appointment the day after her death. Her doctor prescribed her Zoloft and then Xanax to help better control her anxiety. When these weren't helping as much as they'd hoped, the doctor prescribed Ambien and Klonopin. These medicines in particular are designed to help with sleep issues, and her doctor wanted her to work on improving her sleep.
On January 26, 2011, Ellen spoke with her mom on her way to work that morning, and they had a normal conversation, talked about taxes. As the morning progressed, a storm rolled in and blanketed the city in snow, which caused an early release from school. On her way home, Ellen stopped by a gas station and filled up her car before she headed to her and Sam's 6th-floor apartment in Venice Lofts, located in lower northwest Philadelphia. Around 4:45 p.m., Sam left the apartment to go to the gym located in their complex. Video footage shows Sam leaving the gym on the 1st floor and heading back up to his apartment around 5:26 p.m. to find the door locked from the inside. Sam stated that he opened the door with his key but couldn't open it completely due to the swing latch being locked. He called, texted, emailed, and yelled through the door for about an hour trying to get Ellen to respond. Over the hour, the tone of the text grew increasingly frustrated, which is completely understandable if you're locked out of your home and believe your partner is on the other side ignoring you. Here are the texts in the order they were sent to Ellen's phone. Hello? Open the door. What are you doing? I'm getting pissed. Hello? You better have an excuse. What the fuck? Ah! You have no idea. Sam went to the lobby and spoke with Phil Hanton, the lone security guard that night. He urged Hanton to help him break the lock, but Hanton refused, stating it was against policy. Though Hanton said he couldn't help him and did not accompany him back to the apartment, Sam tells police that the security guard did go back to the apartment with him and broke down the door with Hanton present. Once Sam managed to get inside the apartment, he finds Ellen sitting on the floor in a pool of her blood, propped up with her head and shoulders against the corner of the kitchen cabinets. At 6:33 p.m., Sam places a call to 911.
911, what's your emergency?
Sam had been instructed by the dispatcher to perform CPR and remove her shirt. After sounding less than thrilled at the prospect of performing CPR on his wounded fiancé, Sam proceeded to follow the dispatcher's instructions to remove Ellen's jacket. She was wearing a zip-up hoodie to get to her chest to be able to perform chest compressions.
At one point, he says, quote, "Her shirt won't come off. It's a zipper. Oh my God, she stabbed herself," unquote. Everyone reacts to grief and shock differently, so it's impossible to say how you'd react unless in that situation yourself. That being said, you can listen to the 911 call for yourself. Around 6:36 p.m., emergency responders arrive on the scene where they are met with Sam, his cousin, Kamian Schwartzman, and eventually Sam's uncle, James C. Schwartzman. James is a former prosecutor and is described as politically important in the city of Philadelphia. At 6:40 p.m., Ellen Greenberg is pronounced dead. Shortly after, Sam is led away in handcuffs to be questioned by police, which he is later that evening in the presence of an attorney. We need to note here that a couple of interesting things happened right after Ellen was pronounced dead at the scene. According to Tom Brennan, the investigator hired by the Greenbergs, the EMS firefighter that announced Ellen's time of death told his lieutenant that they needed to head back to the station because, quote, when homicide gets here, they're going to want to interview us, end quote. No one ever interviewed the firefighters that were on the scene. Considering they were the first people through the door, they absolutely should have been interviewed about why they were called, what they saw, what was taken in and out, and any other pertinent details. Also, as they were leaving, the firefighter lieutenant commented to the concierge at the complex that they had a murder upstairs.
Ellen and Sam's apartment was located on the 6th floor, so the likelihood of someone breaking in from the balcony in the middle of a snowstorm was not good. Ellen herself didn't have any defensive wounds, and there were no signs of a struggle anywhere in the apartment, so the assumption that police were dealing with a suicide seemed logical and entirely plausible. Except for a tiny detail. Ellen wasn't just stabbed once in the heart. On the following morning, on January 27, 2011, Ellen's body is taken to the office of the medical examiner so her autopsy could be performed by Dr. Marlon Osborne at around 9 a.m. Dr. Osborne finds that Ellen had been stabbed a total of 20 times. Twice in the back of the head, 8 times in the back of the neck, and 10 times in the chest and torso. Ellen's parents had a company named BioMX Consulting create computer models of her autopsy photos to show what happened to her. The images are horrific and very clearly show the brutality of the stabbings. She also had a large gash on the right side of her head, and one of the stab wounds in her chest was 10 centimeters, or almost 4 inches deep. You can find these online easily, but we will also post them on our website and Instagram. Dr. Osborne's autopsy report states there were injuries to the upper lobe of the left lung, liver, and cervical spinal cord.
The knife in question was a Cutco brand steak knife with a serrated edge measuring 12.5 centimeters long. In the investigator's report by Stephen Olszewski, he wrote, quote, upon further examination of the body, the decedent has a knife embedded in her left chest through her clothing, end quote. If you remember earlier when we mentioned the 911 call, Sam exclaimed that Ellen had stabbed herself when he finally got the zipper of her hoodie unstuck. The report just says, quote, through her clothing, unquote. Was the jacket included in that? How did Sam not see the knife there before if it was stabbed through her clothing? And the bigger question would be, if it was under her hoodie and he wasn't able to see it until he unzipped it, then who zipped her hoodie back up over the knife? Are we supposed to believe that Ellen stabbed herself in the heart and then zipped her hoodie back up over it? Or was Sam just in so much shock that he wasn't processing anything he was seeing correctly? Or, different opinion, was he acting for the dispatcher and kept the knife information to himself until he found the most dramatic time to mention it? Not trying to point fingers here, just a thought. Anyway, the initial finding of the cause of death was ruled a homicide.
However, at some point between January 27th and March 18th, Dr. Osborne met with the members of the Philadelphia Police Department, the district attorney's office, and his boss, the chief medical examiner. After this meeting, Dr. Osborne changed his finding from homicide to suicide. When questioned by Ellen's parents' attorney, Joe Pedraza, about the change in the findings, Dr. Osborne stated the toxicology report had not come back yet at the time of the initial autopsy, along with psychological records. He also stated that the police and DEA provided information about their conversations with Sam Goldberg. The knife involved in the stabbing was also going to be tested for DNA, and the scene was gone over again to determine what would be factors for homicide versus suicide. It's extremely important to note that Dr. Osborne says that 2 investigating officers came to him prior to his meeting with the DEA's office and asked him to change the findings from homicide to suicide. The police had never before asked him to change the manner and cause of death in an autopsy report in his many years with the medical examiner's office. Why suddenly would the police department ask to change the cause of death for Ellen's case specifically? Maybe the bigger question is, how does someone stab themselves in the back of the head and neck multiple times? According to the report provided by BioMX Consulting, the stab wounds to the back of her head and neck, quote, are not biomechanically consistent with self-infliction and are consistent with stabbing by an assailant, end quote. Meaning there's no way she could have moved her arm in such a way at a strong enough force to injure herself in that way. Even just looking at the generated models, common sense tells you there's no way she could have inflicted those injuries on herself.
Now let's go back to the day after the incident, January 27th, 2011. Sam's uncle, James C. Schwartzman, that Philadelphia judge and chair of the Ethics and Responsibility Group, well, he requested access to Sam and Ellen's apartment. Melissa Ware, the apartment manager of the Venice Lofts at the time, receives the call from Mr. Schwartzman asking for her assistance in entering his nephew's apartment so he can retrieve a suit for Sam to wear to Ellen's funeral. Ellen was just found dead not even 24 hours before, so Melissa contacts the police to ask if it is okay for anyone to enter the apartment. The police inform her that the crime scene has been released and anyone can enter. It hasn't even been searched at this point. Melissa inquires about cleaning up and is told that it is not up to them to clean it up and that Melissa can hire professionals. They give her information for a company called Crime Scene Cleanup to handle the job. Melissa decides to go ahead and take a video record of the apartment before calling Mr. Schwartzman or the cleanup crew and allowing them in. Later that day, James C. Schwartzman arrives at the apartment and oddly enough ends up taking Ellen's work laptop, personal laptop, Sam's laptop, and Ellen's cell phone, along with some other items from the apartment. The cleanup crew arrives later and does their job, cleaning up Sam and Ellen's apartment, effectively and professionally removing any trace of the tragedy that had happened the night before. But what use did Sam's uncle, the judge, have for Sam and Ellen's laptops and Ellen's personal phone?
Was he grabbing them to take to Sam or Ellen's parents because they didn't want to return to the scene of the tragedy? Wouldn't those items be useful for investigators to look through to see if there were any signs of nefarious or otherwise interesting signs of a potentially dangerous situation? Philadelphia police didn't issue a search warrant to investigate the scene until January 28th, after the apartment had been wiped clean. The personal items and electronics aren't retrieved by investigators until January 29th, 2011, 2 days after the death was initially ruled a homicide by Dr. Osborne. The fact that the apartment was open to the public and cleaned not even 24 hours after the incident leaves so much room for evidence to be wiped away or destroyed by multiple people moving throughout the scene. Investigator Tom Brennan's theory is that the police were planning to wipe their hands of it until Dr. Osborne came back with a finding of homicide on the autopsy report. Then they had to backtrack and do a little extra work on a scene that had already been blatantly tampered with.
Let's turn our attention to the scene of the incident. We're going to avoid calling it a suicide on this podcast because, sorry, it wasn't one. First, we'll talk about the door latch that Sam told investigators he broke trying to break into the locked apartment. The images show the portion of the latch that was attached to the door has been partially torn away. It definitely looks like someone could have been attempting to force it open against the closed latch and in turn bending and tearing the screws from the door. But there is absolutely no damage to the wooden door jamb itself. Tom Brennan, the private investigator that was working for the Greenbergs, he's been very vocal about his opinion that there is no way the latch could have been broken and opened with so little damage done to the door. Several investigators and true crime enthusiasts have tested what happens when breaking a closed swing latch on the door. You can find examples on YouTube, but basically, when hitting a locked latch like that with full bodily force, it will completely break away from a wooden door frame, taking some of the door frame along with it.
The fact that the swing portion of the latch is still in place and no damage has been done to the door frame is really questionable when you think about how much force would have been used to break the latch. The only other way into the apartment was through a 6th floor balcony, but this was ruled out immediately due to the height and lack of disturbed snow. Now, if you recall, Sam Goldberg told investigators that the security guard from the complex accompanied him back to the 6th floor apartment and witnessed him break down the door, where they both found Ellen propped up against the kitchen counters. This is one of the key pieces of evidence used to rule her death as a suicide. In June of 2021, that security guard issued a written statement that he did not at any time leave his position at the front desk on January 26, 2011. He goes on to explain that all security footage from that day between 3 p.m. and 7 p.m. has been reviewed, and at no time is he seen leaving his post or going up to the elevator to the apartment. He also states that he does not know what Sam Goldberg did or did not do to get into the apartment, and he did not see Miss Greenberg inside the apartment. This proves that one of the key pieces in this case isn't true.
Moving on to the injuries Ellen sustained during the attack, in 2019, a pathologist working with the Greenbergs approached Dr. Lindsay Emery, a medical examiner in Philadelphia, asking her for her opinion on Ellen's case. There is testimony by Dr. Emery from October of 2021 stating that there was no hemorrhaging present from several stab wounds to Ellen's spine. In her words, no hemorrhaging means no pulse. This would indicate that Ellen was already dead when she received some of the wounds. Dead people generally can't stab themselves. Let's be clear that this isn't 100% certainty because the other possibility is that the hemorrhage washed away during the autopsy. However, it's unlikely that wounds like the ones she sustained would be washed away during the autopsy process. Ellen was right-handed, and she was found with a kitchen towel in her left hand. This means that she would have had to wrap her right hand back behind her head and angle the knife straight toward the far back left of her head. It's a very hard angle to reach and requires a great deal of flexibility and strength. Not to mention the range of motion from that angle would come from above your head, not behind it in the way that she was stabbed.
Another key piece of information that was disclosed during the autopsy that raises doubt about the ruling of suicide is that there were a large amount of bruises all over Ellen's body in various stages of healing. It had been said that Ellen had received them from playing contact sports and or working out, but Ellen was a school teacher who didn't play contact sports, and what the hell kind of workout causes bruising like that all over your body? Ellen's family has fought endlessly to have the medical examiner's ruling of suicide overturned. They don't necessarily want it to be changed to homicide, even though that's what a lot of the evidence strongly points to. But changing it to at least undetermined would free Ellen of the stigma of having allegedly taken her own life. Besides hiring private investigators and getting second opinions from multiple neuropathologists, the family has also had the famous forensic neuropathologist Dr. Cyril Wecht review Ellen's reports in January 2012. In his professional opinion, the manner of death is strongly suspicious of homicide.
In October of 2019, the Greenbergs and their attorney, Joseph Pedraza, filed a civil lawsuit against the City of Philadelphia, the Medical Examiner's Office, and Dr. Osborne, seeking to have the manner of Ellen's death changed back to homicide or undetermined. Doing this would allow for investigation to be reopened. In August of 2022, the Chester County District Attorney's Office announced that it has assigned an investigator and prosecutor to re-review Ellen's death in place of Philadelphia DA Larry Krasner, who has a conflict of interest in the case. This is a huge step forward and hopefully one that will finally bring answers to Ellen's family. In October 2022, they filed a second lawsuit against several other people in the medical examiner's office, 2 members of the Philadelphia Police Department, and a member of the district attorney's office. The case seeks damages for their individual and official willful misconduct in participation in a conspiracy to cover up for more than 11 years the murder of Ellen R. Greenberg. On February 2nd, 2023, the lawsuit against former Assistant District Attorney Ann Pontario was dismissed under the objection that she has immunity from such lawsuits because of her high standing. Insert eye roll here. As for Sam Goldberg, he is married and living with his wife and 2 children in New York State.
Well, that brings us up to date on the very questionable death of Ellen Ray Greenberg. There are never-ending details about her case that could keep us here for hours, but we wanted to cover the main points that raise questions. Obviously, there are no current suspects in the case, but opinions about what happened are very strong. Hopefully, there will be more updates in the near future. If you want to support the Greenberg family, consider visiting the Justice for Ellen Ray Greenberg page on change.org and signing the petition. There are also Facebook and Instagram pages, which we will link in the show notes. We will post pictures on the case on Instagram, so make sure to follow us at Weird True Crime. We also want to shout out Gavin Fish for his incredibly detailed investigation into Ellen's case and for being such a huge advocate for her family over the past few years.
We did it! It is so nice to be researching and recording content again. It has been far too long. But before we say goodbye, we want to start sharing reviews and giving love to the listeners who support us in our creepy little corner of this giant podcast world. This review is from Nate, who has been a champion since the beginning. It's titled, "Every Episode Gets Better," and he gave us 5 stars. Nate wrote, "I was very excited to discover this gem. It's a delightful journey to see them improve with each episode's release. Fascinating topics and pleasant voices make for a powerful combination." Nate, your review is so kind, and it's comments like those that keep us going. If you want to be awesome like Nate and get a shout out on a future episode, be sure to give us a rating and review on your favorite podcast app. And if you can't write a review on the app, feel free to email it to us at weirdtruecrime@gmail.com. Also, we'd love to hear your thoughts on the cases we cover and get your weird true crime suggestions and personal stories, so email us with those as well. So until next time, stay safe.
And make good choices.
Bye.
Bye. Sam had been instructed by the dispatcher to form words are hard. Try that again.
At one point, he says, quote, "Her shirt won't..." Oh my God. Okay. I'm also struggling.
Son of a bitch, don't give me the giggles. Okay, getting back into it. Focus, breathe, woosah. Let's go. Ellen and Sam's apartment was located on the 6th floor, so the likelihood of someone breaking in from the balcony in the middle of a
A showstorm.
Shitstorm's right. Actually, so if it was the following morning and we went back a year, then this would be a really, really weird case. But why suddenly would the police department ask? Ellen's family has fought tirelessly to start that again. Ellen's family has fought tirelessly to have the medical examiner fuck. I had a frog in my throat. I apologize. If you want... No, that's clearly not. Right.
In August of 1980, Carol Bundy confessed her connection to the Sunset Strip Slayer who had been terrorizing Los Angelinos all summer.
In September of 2012, the cult of the Unification Church, also known as the Moonies, mourned the death of their leader, Sun Myung Moon.
Tune into Murder Murder News every Friday to hear us detangle another twisted tale from true crime history.
If you're an amateur sleuth who hopes to someday solve a cold case or locate a missing person, tune into Murder Murder News and start off your search with a deep dive into some fascinating and very solvable cases.
We always take a victim-first stance and like to focus on crimes affecting marginalized communities, which typically don't get enough media attention.
Subscribe to Murder Murder News wherever you get your podcast to make sure you never miss an episode.